Next up, I want to talk a bit about BCS, or Business Connectivity Services, in SharePoint 2010. So what is this? Well, the quick 6-word summary is it's something that can make SharePoint talk to external systems. Okay, like what? Well, most commonly and easiest to understand, a separate database, but it could be a database, could be a web service, could be another application. Now, the question that might be running through your mind here is, haven't we just been doing this? Well, yes, kind of. This is another way to do it. If you remember that what we've been focusing on are very much the single page model, defining a data source and inserting it onto a page. But using the much more powerful BCS allows us to really make that data part of our site, use it on multiple pages, use it in other lists and libraries, get it into Office applications, even include it in search results within SharePoint. These days, whenever I have to do anything with SharePoint and external data, BCS is my primary choice. Now, I do go through the regular data sources first when I'm teaching this, because BCS does take a little bit more time to set up in SharePoint Designer than a regular data source, but it's worth it, as I'll demonstrate. Now, if you're coming from SharePoint 2007, you might have heard or even used a feature called BDC, or Business Data Catalog. Now, it was also designed to do this, to be a connectivity story between SharePoint and external data. But for those of you who encountered BDC, here's the core differences. Now, BDC in 2007 was read-only, and BCS is the CRUD, or Create, Read, Update, Delete. We've got full read-write support in this version. BDC, you had to write a lot of XML to get this thing to work, whereas BCS in 2010, most of it can be done through the user interface of SharePoint Designer. And in SharePoint 2007, BDC was only available if you had paid for the very expensive Server Enterprise license, whereas we have BCS features even in SharePoint Foundation, the free version of SharePoint this time around. But the biggest practical difference between the two is that BDC in SharePoint 2007 was just awful. It wasn't actually difficult, but it was mind-numbingly tedious, unfriendly, and unpleasant. It was like doing your taxes while having a root canal at the same time, and BCS isn't. Doing the exact same thing, describing connections to external data, is actually quite pleasant in SharePoint 2010. And I think a lot of people from SharePoint 2007 kind of avoided BCS because they think it's the next version of BDC, and it's much more pleasant these days. It really is night and day. However, there is kind of an issue with trying to learn it, because like much of SharePoint, trying to understand Business Connectivity Services, or BCS, as if it's one coherent feature, well, it's just going to give you a headache, because it's really a bunch of little pieces all wrapped up and given this name BCS. There are pieces for Office, pieces for SharePoint Foundation, SharePoint Enterprise. And one of the issues with first learning BCS is that there's a bunch of jargon to it, and it's difficult to tell which of these things are important and which aren't. Well, let me make it a lot easier for you. There's basically one key concept that we need to understand to get started with BCS, and that's something called an external content type. This is the most important thing in BCS, the single most important piece. An external content type is a representation, a description of that external object, that product or customer or order, that thing that exists in your external system that you want to bring into SharePoint. Content types, of course, are things that we define inside SharePoint to describe the stuff we have inside SharePoint, like documents and images and lists and items. Well, an external content type is the same idea. We're just describing that piece that sits outside of our system. But everything we do in BCS is based on this idea of an external content type. This is step one. So let's see how to make one.